Thank you, Mo. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
This is Yusuf Haji at the Haji Live. You are watching us on Twitter at the Haji Daily, Facebook Haji Daily, so YouTube at Haji Daily. Well, we gotta talk a lot today. We have a lot of things we want to talk about, but more importantly, we're gonna have some great conversation with Mickey Mo. As you all know, Mickey and I were both candidates for Minneapolis City Council Ward. And we both lost. We actually got beat. But that's not why we're here. That's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the process leading to November election of last year for the city council, almost citywide election. And that is the conversation we're going to be opening up soon. So I'm glad Mickey is here with me again. We had to redo the show because the other show was kind of a little bit disorganized, but hopefully today we can get this thing under control and hopefully have an well-organized, well put forward with evidence and as much as we can with facts on here so that we can have a great conversation about how to steal the DFL endorsement. Mickey, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. Always happy to be a part of it.
Thank you, man. Welcome. So I guess my first question to you was, so you and I both came into the city council race last year, hoping we were going to make some changes. You had ideas, I had ideas, and so are other candidates. Do you remember how many total candidates we had running for city council?
At one point there was about 9, because a bunch of people on the last day of registration, a bunch of brand new people that I've never heard of before suddenly were registered to be a part of it. So, we had people that were in early that dropped out, but there were also people that just showed up on the very last day of registration with like little more than a month or two to go before the election that signed up and wanted to have their name on the ballot. So I think when it was all said and done, boy, there must have been at least 7 people on the official ballot, maybe 8.
Oh, okay. I think it was more than that, but that's okay. So my question to you is, like I mentioned before, Mickey, coming into the Ward 9, what did you hope to accomplish from this race when you decided you wanted to run? What had you hoped to accomplish from this running for City Council Ward 9?
Well, I always said from the very beginning, I mean, Haji, if you recall, my house in Minneapolis is technically in Ward 8. Okay, I've lived in Minneapolis I've lived in Minneapolis all my life, but I've lived at that location in Ward 8 for over 35 years, something like 38, going on 39 years, close to 40 years at that one location. Everybody knows me. I live on a corner house. I've been there for almost 40 years. Everybody knows me. The reason why I was running for city council in Ward 9 is because that area is very, very near and dear to my heart. I have lived there from time to time. I've opened businesses there. My community, my customer base is from there. I'm telling you, Lake Street is my street. And when I saw the field of candidates and the lack of experience and the lack of real world experience from some of those candidates, I really felt that at this time, with everything that was going on in Ward 9, that community deserved somebody that really knew what they were doing, that had experience working at multiple levels of government, at the state level, at the county level, at the city level, at the local level, somebody who had accomplished things already. I'm going into the race as a successful businessman that has started an entire industry that now employs hundreds of people and specifically works to the betterment of the African American community and the African immigrant community, 2 communities that are very critical for Ward 9. I've got experience in business working with the Latino community through my international phone card operation that was successful for over a decade. And so I had ties and links and background and experience with this exact area and with the people that were going to be needed to galvanize and restore that community to its highest heights and what it's really capable of and what it needs and what it deserves. So that's why I came into it as a Ward 9 candidate. A lot of people forget that I specifically selected Ward 9. I moved into Ward 9. I moved across the street from Powderhorn Park so that I would be able to run in Ward 9 and be the city councilman for that area. I thought it was that important, following all the destructive conditions and situations, the aftermath of the George Floyd and the protests and the whole COVID pandemic and everything that had happened. So it was critical. That space was critical.
Let's talk about the process, the DFL process from the caucus and the whole endorsement process. How was that experience for you?
Well, I'm a newcomer. I'm not a politician. So, a lot of it was brand new to me, despite the fact that I had run a grassroots third-party campaign for Congressional District 5 just 1 year before. That was kind of my foray into politics, was just running a I can't possibly win campaign for Congress that was amazingly successful. That's why I thought, well, geez, maybe I ought to run for a position I could actually win and do some good. But I didn't know about this process until I was knee deep in it. And I didn't realize how corrupted and really perverted it was. It was not at all what you would expect. It's not what you think of when you think of democracy. It's not an appeal to the common voter for their support. It's way more it just engenders complete mistrust in the system because it's so perverse. It's all about networking and connections with radical activist groups and how many phone numbers you can get from these various organizations that are out there with their various agendas. So if you've got connections with Our Revolution, if you've got connections with Minneapolis Now, if you've got connections with the various branches of these local, DFL organizations and union groups and stuff like that, it's all about getting individual people that you can get on your side to kind of create a lopsided and imbalanced effect throughout this endorsement process. It's really quite sad, and it now tells me and informs me as to why our local politics is so corrupted and misguided, and why we've got such bad leadership in local politics. It's if we don't change the way this election process works, Minneapolis is going to have this problem for a long time to come. You're not getting the best and most qualified candidates. You're getting people that have gamed the system and learned how to game the system. Now, looking back on it, that's why we can see why these radical upstart people out of nowhere have been able to come into Minneapolis from out of town and use their political savvy to rig the system in their favor. Now I get it. I didn't get it before. I was stunned when Jeff Hayden lost to Omar Fatah. I was stunned. If you read their backgrounds and you look,
and we're gonna go deeply into that later on in our shows. But yes, and I have my views as well on. I was also a candidate for City Council Ward 9. And I am a Somali black immigrant man who is married with 4 children. And that experience for me was very discriminatory in a way, because I didn't feel welcome by the same group that you're complaining about. And it was very clear I was not even given a chance to really explain myself and put forward my idea of what I want and changes that I wanted. So as part of that,
I saw it in real time. Yeah,
Yes.
your whole effort was never accepted as a serious, much like mine was never accepted. It's just a token kind of ability to get your name on the ballot, and that's it. You know, as far as being accepted as a legitimate candidate, it never happened.
There was never a chance for us to even have that conversation. I think there are people that already had made up their mind. They were going to steal this process for someone, and it didn't matter. No matter who else was running. If you're a black woman who was running for city council, it didn't matter. If you're a black man, an immigrant, Mickey Moore, or anybody, it didn't matter. They had already decided who they wanted to be at Ward 9. I know for a fact that at the beginning, Margarita Ortega was the favorite. Well, for them, it was the front runner, and Margarita, for some reason, did drop out. And now the decision was arrived that one of the candidates who won eventually was favored to win. So this whole process, I'm not here to talk about November election. November election, both Mickey and I and many other people who ran, we lost. It was a clear, win for Jason Chavez. So we're not questioning that. We're not questioning that specific time, the main election. What we're questioning is the DFL process inclusive enough? Is the DFL process of endorsement fair enough? And we got some things that we can point to and some articles that we can point to show that this has been an ongoing conversation from April, the beginning of this whole process, actually March. And so what we're doing, right, we're just talking about, our personal experience and what we are seeing and what changes we want for the DFL. I hope they do change. So Mickey, I want to ask you, apart from, people pushing you or you and I and many other candidates away from, the conversation, the real conversation about who best can represent Ward 9. You were personally attacked on social media. You were personally attacked even at local events. How did that impact you and your family? Because I know you're a dad. I'm a father too, and I felt that, I felt that politics should be about politics and discussion and ideas, right? It shouldn't be about personal family. Do you have something to say to that?
Well, at the time, it was my impression that it was really out of fear. I think that the campaigns that really had nothing to offer in terms of good ideas or responsive leadership were just looking to, that's their modus operandi. That's the way they fight, is because they don't have issues to fight on. They just make it personal and they just attack. Specifically using, complete misinformation, disinformation, or outright lies to try to, defame or slander, their opponents. Specific, me, other people as well. I wasn't the only one who had these kind of things happen to them. But, it's looking back on it, I want to make it clear that I agree with you. I don't honestly believe there was anything I could do. I don't want to speak for you, but I know for a fact there was nothing I could do that would have gained me enough votes to win the 9th Ward election. That just wasn't going to happen. So many people voted for the eventual winner that it's just not realistic to think I could have ever got more votes than that, no matter what was done, no matter how people ran their campaign. So, I mean, it didn't actually affect the outcome, but it certainly is disconcerting to think that somebody without experience, without a solid game plan, without any noticeable abilities to speak of, can just run on games and networking and disinformation of the other candidates and end up winning. I mean, that's a recipe for total disaster for our city. I would argue that the 9th Ward is the ward that's most desperately in need of leadership right now. I mean, It's the ward that has the most problems economically, socially, culturally, public safety wise, education wise, healthcare wise. The litter on the streets is worse. The business environment is the worst it's ever been. So many things are going wrong within the ninth ward. Environmental justice is a serious problem within the ninth ward. We can go on and on. That's just a tip of the iceberg of the list. And we've got somebody, our closest and most valuable potential leader is somebody with zero experience and zero looks like willingness to be a responsive and a reflective member of that community. And so it's not going to get better. It's probably going to get worse.
And we talk about, we were just talking about, so we again, I want to re-emphasize what we're talking about. The conversation we're having is our personal experience running for City Council Ward 9. And also what we saw leading up to the main election, we lost, and Nick and I and many other candidates lost. Jason Chavez won, but we're not questioning that. What we're talking about now here is, look at this. It's a Sahan Journal. This is from June 3rd, 2021. It says, with its virtual caucus already underway, Minneapolis DFL faces charges that the process is so discriminatory it must be scrapped. What do you think of that article? This is June 3rd, 2021, right? Just go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I mean, that's in the thick of our attempt to gain delegates. And you and I'm guessing you and I had the exact same experience where we're reaching out to people that are potential delegates, and we're finding a real complete disconnect between our delegate list and reality. I mean, I'm walking up and down the streets and talking to people and hearing one reality. Then I'm looking at this delegate list and it's completely not reflecting reality at all. It was amazing. You could walk up and down a street and talk to 100 people, and 85 of them will tell you, yeah, public safety is our number one issue. We're looking to restore the relationship between the community and the police. We'd like to rebuild the 3rd Precinct police station. That's the one that burned down after George Floyd. All these things about economics, all these various issues that's the reality when you talk to people on the street. Then you call this delegate list and you get the most extremist positions you've ever heard. I never had anybody tell me to my face that they thought that the police of Minneapolis were equivalent to the KKK. That was something I never heard. I talked to thousands of people. I literally walked Ward 9 3 separate times. Okay, I knocked on every door. I talked to every person I met. I never heard anybody compare the Minneapolis police to the KKK. Yet, when I called people from our delegates list, I heard that all the time. It was literally a common refrain. And the reason I bring up that example is because it's a tip-off. When so many people say the same exact thing, use the same phrasing and terminology to refer to this group, it tells me that these people are all coming from the exact same place. They're not coming from the streets of Ward 9. They're not coming from the residences of Ward 9 where I knocked on their doors. They're coming from someplace else. I don't know where, but they all had the same exact thing to say. All of a sudden, I started hearing things that I never heard in a face-to-face conversation with any resident or person living in Ward 9. It was very odd, very strange. And again, as a newcomer to the process, I was taken aback, but I completely concur with the idea or the summary conclusion by some longtime DFL stalwarts who claim that this process is fatally flawed. Okay, what they mean by when they say fatally flawed, what they mean is this process gives us a counterproductive result. Okay,
right.
the process.
Yeah,
go ahead.
So we talked about the process of what we experienced, the process, the fraudulent process to get someone endorsed in the City Council Ward 9. That happened. You've talked about Mickey Moore. Now, my question to you, Mickey, here is another article by the NPR actually, and this was May 10th, 2022. This is very recent. This is the conversation police are actually having right now. And nobody else is talking about it. They talk about you when you were running and the things that you're doing, but no, everybody is quiet now. The Twitter warriors are quiet. The groups that are constantly organizing themselves around making sure that Mickey Mo and Haji and any other person doesn't win this race are suddenly quiet and not saying anything about this. And this is what's going on. And it says jury convicts DFL campaign volunteer of lying in the ballot fraud investigation. This is May 10, 2022. This comes from Jeff Hayden. Remember, I had told you that we're going to have this conversation about Jeff Hayden as well as part of this tonight. So what's your view on this, Mickey Moore? What do you think?
Well, this explains a lot. Let me be clear. I know Jeff. I live just 8 houses away from Jeff for a dozen years. He lives just down the street from me. So I've known Jeff for 20 years. He's been in state politics since, I don't know, 2000, mid 2000s, something like that. He has accomplished more as a state elected official than just about anybody in government. The guy works tirelessly for his community. He is elected with huge percent wins. I mean, primaries, endorsements. This guy is the most bankable elected official our state has had in a long time. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, this guy who just moved to Minnesota from Washington, D.C. Okay.
Somewhere in the East Coast. I think it is.
I thought it was somewhere. I thought it was Washington, D.C. I could be wrong about that, but he had only lived in Minnesota for 4 or 5 years. 3-4 years before he ran against Jeff Hayden.
I just want to interrupt and tell you that actually somebody advised him to come run for office in Minneapolis, and then he ran for state representative. He lost to Holden Hassan, who is the current state representative for 62. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I bet they did, because there is a lot of that going on. That's how Philippe Cunningham showed up here. That's why so many of these upstart activists, that's why Robin, what's her name, from Ward 2, that's why she came here. People come to Minneapolis because it is possible to activate yourself through this process. It is a very floppy, corrupt, and flawed process that allows highly extremist candidates to activate a specific base of people to co-opt and corrupt this system that we're talking about. And somehow that's what Omar Fattah did through a combination of his extremist agenda and clearly some fraudulent activity, because this guy was convicted of just a few cases of fraud, but it's ridiculous and unrealistic to think that we don't need to multiply what he did times many, many hundreds if we want to talk about the reality of the fraud involved with his actions. I mean, he didn't just do it a few times. He did this hundreds.
And here is the article from Minnesota Reformer. Sources: Senator Omar Fattah misled DFL colleagues about the federal perjury cases. The case is connected to a grand jury investigation of ballot fraud. State Senator Omar Fattah of Minneapolis misled Senate Democratic leader about his relationship with a man recently convicted of perjury, according to 2 DFL sources with the knowledge of conversation. And so lying from the DFL endorsement process to lying to your friends and allies, it says a lot about what the person is. I don't understand why organizations that have endorsed Omar Fattah, organizations that have endorsed Jason Chavez, organizations that have endorsed Zainab Mohammed, who is also running for Senate seat, are quiet about this. And there's a lot of names that are being thrown in. I know Jason Chavez's name is not here, by the way. There's no way that I see in any of the article. It doesn't show that he's connected. But what we are saying, he's a public official, and so we have every
Well,
right to go ahead, Mickey.
let's be fair and clear. Jason Chavez, a huge campaign staffer for Omar Fattah. When in 2020, Omar Fattah found a way to miraculously come up with twice as many primary votes as had been cast in the previous election, and beat Jeff Hayden for the DFL endorsement in that primary, they went to Jason Chavez to get a quote. Jason Chavez, how did Omar Fattah win this primary? Oh, well, rent control, rent, whatever. So it's not that Jason Chavez is completely free of connections from Omar Fattah. He was
No,
right
he
there.
is connected. He is connected. Here is the connection. Zainab and Omar Fattah are related. So Zainab are related. So Omar Fattah is married to Zainab, sister. Zainab, her brother is the one that has been has been convicted of lying to the FBI. Zainab is running for Senate seat. Omar Fattah is defending his Senate seat. The guy that is going to jail probably. I don't want to dwell on that. And the campaign manager of Senator Omar Fattah is connected to Jason's election and the DFL endorsement for City Council Ward 9. He actually provided lists of people that participated on behalf of Jason Chavez in that DFL endorsement process, and including now Devin Hogan and Zainab Den, who was actually part of the DFL team, organizing, planning, and also doing the process itself. So that is the connection I'm talking about. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, no, you're right. I mean, there's a deep, deep connection between all of these players. And the fact that Omar Fattah would lie to the DFL leadership and say he had no relationship to Muhammad just shows you the lengths at which he would go to try to cover up what he knows is malfeasance. I mean, obviously, if you're blood relations or legal relation to somebody, you're going to know exactly what they're doing and why. So this is not something brand new that just happened one time. This is something that is an ongoing and systemic issue within this group of players, and it's not unlikely that it bled into the process with which Zainab and Chavez were both a part of when it came to the city council race. So it's just par for the course. The way this is their standard operating procedure now. Bend all possible rules, and if you happen to break them, whatever, as long as you win, that's what matters most. Just win at all costs. And it's not healthy for the process. Yeah, it's not fair for the candidates, but more than that, it's bad for the people, because now instead of legitimate homegrown leadership that we get for our vote, we're getting gimmicks and games and nonsense, and we're not getting anything that we can rely on to be responsive or reflective or inclusive of each individual community. We're getting something that's very inorganic and unhelpful in the long run. I mean, let me ask you a question, Haji.
Go ahead.
What issues would you have already brought to the forefront for Ward 9 that we see not even discussed with the current leadership? What issues did you have at the top of your agenda that, had you been elected, you would have already and immediately begun implementation of?
When I ran for office, I was very angry. One of the reasons why I ran for office is because of George Floyd and what happened to George Floyd. And when we went to George Floyd Memorial, and I had a conversation with my 7-year-old son. Then it was a serious thing for me to look at it and say, you know what, this cannot go on, right? We can't have police brutality. We can't have people on the streets just getting killed. Not only in Minneapolis but across America, right? That my anger partly came from that, just wanting to be part of this change that I wanted to see when it came to policing and people of color, right? Communities that are most likely to be affected by police and police relation and police brutality. So I came in at the beginning thinking that that is what was needed. Like, I really wanted to come in and say, you know what, enough is enough. We got to do something about Minneapolis PD. So as I continue campaigning and having this conversation within Ward 9, people, I had it, especially among our Latino and our East African community. And I realized that these communities have been left out in this conversation about what the future of policing should look like in Minneapolis. Because most of these communities don't speak English. Most of these communities don't write English. Most of these communities receive, stuff in the mail that is not written in their own languages, right? So these communities had no idea that there is a debate going on there about changing what policing will look like for Minneapolis. And that was on the ballot. People did not know. I know the Somali community did not know. I know our Latino community did not know, because I was having this conversation. I had Latino staff with me. I was teaching myself Spanish to have this conversation with these communities. But they had no idea that this is what, and they didn't, even if they knew, they didn't understand what it was all about, right? What was this defund or abolish the police movement was all about? I mean, because that is all what people hear. They did not really understand what the end goal was for this. So a lot of people are confused, about what policing for Minneapolis will look like, right? And so for me, having seen that these people have been left out, I decided that I was gonna really make sure that we reform the police instead of defunding the police. So this is the conversation I was having with the Somali community. This is the conversation I was having with the Latino community, explaining to people why we should reform the police for better, not to defund or not to disband or not to abolish the police, because those were too strong of words. You can't even start a conversation once you start talking about police and immediately you talk about defunding, abolishing, and disbanding the police. Then the conversation is no longer there. It's done. So for me, I looked at these communities and I felt they are a victim of police brutality. Why were they not being included into this conversation? Why were groups were pouring in millions and millions into this election? Millions of dollars were poured into this election. None of the groups, the yes group, the no group, none of them did any outreach to these communities and talk to them about what it means to reform or to really change what policing will look like for Minneapolis. So for me, coming from that, I decided that and I was going to fight and trying to explain to people why it's very important. As a father also, I'm speaking as a father, and nobody wanted to hear that. These groups had emotional attachments to this disband and abolish. They didn't want to hear anything. They didn't want to hear my reasoning for it. As a father of 4 Black children and taking my children to George Floyd Memorial and having this conversation, for me, it was important that we work on reforming the police and changing how we police our community in Minneapolis, and also investing in our youth, investing in our communities as well. So for me, that is what I really want to get into, and that I wanted to be sitting at that table, having those conversations and looking at things that will work eventually for all our communities that live in Minneapolis. I just felt like some people were left out under this process, and I changed my mind, basically.
Yeah, and we're not getting that representation now. I mean, Ward 9 is being completely left wide open with essentially no representation of that aspect. About we have nobody advocating for police reform for our ward. We have an advocate who's insisting still to this day, insisting that the best thing that could happen for Ward 9 is not to have any police. That's their attitude. That was their attitude from the beginning. I know there was a little bit.
We can't. There are communities. There are communities in Ward 9 that cannot be without police.
Well,
Our immigrant Latino communities, who mostly undocumented, faced crime
right
wave
now.
after crime wave, criminals after criminals that are breaking into their houses and stealing their stuff, and they can't go to the police and report this because they are afraid to be deported. Right? We have Somali and East African communities that have started businesses in this community. You have people walking into shops and shooting up shopkeepers or shop owners or business owners in Minneapolis, in Ward 9 and Ward 6. These are
or
people
just
that have come to
boldly stealing their stock right
boldly
off the shelf.
stealing. Yes, yeah. So I am not going to abandon these communities because I want to be in a group that feel like they're going to give me a vote. That's not who I am. You know, I'm not gonna stand aside and watch Somali community, the East African community, become victims of crime in Minneapolis. I'm not gonna stand around and watch our Latino neighbors getting robbed, getting killed, getting pushed out, getting harassed, because some of these criminals, they know these communities are undocumented. They know that. And these communities can report this to the police because they don't want to get deported or they don't want to end up in the hands of immigration, right? So we're dealing with an issue where this community cannot be. And this community clearly said that they want police in Minneapolis. They voted for it, right? So this is very clear, you know, that we shall have and we should keep and we shall we reform? Yes. We need better policing for Minneapolis? Yes. Go ahead.
No, that just brings us back to the point of this, of what the preface of your whole of this show, which was about stealing the endorsement. What happens when you are able to steal the endorsement instead of working to respond proactively to the needs of your community to honestly earn the endorsement? You see, then you can just do whatever you want when you become elected. You don't have to respond to the community. You don't have to reflect the needs of the community because you are getting your endorsement another way. You don't have to earn their votes because you are tricking and gaming the system in order to get elected. You see, and that's why it's so dangerous. That's why when those experienced leaders issued their statement, they used the term fatally flawed, because this is what you end up with. You end up with somebody in an elected official position who doesn't feel the need to connect with the accuracy of their community. They don't feel the need to accurately reflect the needs and what their community deserves from them. They feel like they can go off on their own and appeal strictly to their socialist, activist, extremist base, because whether they live in Ward 9 or wherever, they know they can count on those people to get them elected next time. You see, they appeal.
And now the people who are on the platform of defunding and abolishing the police, are police brutal? Yes. Do we have corrupt officers that are racist, that are targeting minority, our black communities, our immigrant community? Yes. Do we need to make sure that we get rid of them? Yes. Do we need to make sure that we there's steps that I have put down for part of my vision for this reform? And so yes, we want change, right?
And let me just add, you're talking about specific officers.
And now just let me just quickly say, and so now there's people that basically have boxed themselves in this, and they can't get out. They can't change their mind, even if most of the people that live in what they voted, they don't want to come out because now they're gonna But go ahead.
Well, that's how they got elected, by appealing to that extremist group that wants to defund, abolish, or dismantle the police. And you mentioned individual officers that we need to root out. All of that is true. But let me just go one step further and mention that there are systemic and cultural issues within the police department that need to absolutely be rooted out and reformed. It's bigger than just the individuals. It's the system in which they were trained and in which they have develop this level of comfort with their actions and with their what they call inherent biases and all the various actions that they take that end up looking bad and end up with bad results. So it's a systemic problem that we need to affect change upon. And we have to have the right people in place in order to do that. And when you have leaders that don't feel that they have to respond to the community that they serve, we're never going to move in the right direction. When we have people like that lady from Ward 2, I always forget her name, Robin, whatever, who absolutely has lied to her community and to the city at large about the desire of people that live in and around the third precinct to rebuild the third precinct police station. It's outrageous. The desire to rebuild the third precinct is prevailing. People that live anywhere near there recognize and know that they absolutely need that third precinct police station rebuilt. Yet she continues to promote this idea that, oh, there's an argument or it's a split decision or a lot of people don't want it and what have you. Nothing could be further from the truth. And if you've got elected leaders that are just spewing their personal agenda, their own personal political agenda at the cost, to the detriment of our own community, we are totally going in the wrong direction. I feel terrible. Not that I lost. I feel terrible that Minneapolis could have had better leadership, needed better leadership, and deserves better leadership, and it's not getting it. I feel terrible about that.
Thank you very much, Mickey Moore. We're coming to the end of our show for today, and we're hoping to have more conversation like this moving forward. Mickey and I will be here talking about so many things about the state of Minnesota, and it's not only about city council and voter fraud and DFL, process that is easily manipulated, to favor certain candidates or groups. We're going to talk about governance race. We're going to talk about Senate, House, all this, in our next show, next Monday about the same time. We continue having this opening up. I want to tell everyone who is out there, man, you need to participate in this process from the beginning, from the caucus process to the DFL process to the election. And it's your voice. It's your voice. You can get it done. And I hope all of us participate in this process and make sure that we collectively elect people that we want to be in office. We can't just sit back and always complain. You must organize. You must participate. You must be part of that process. You must be part of that process. So you need to be the chairman, woman. You need to be a volunteer in the DFL. You need to be sitting at that table for you to pay attention and listen and make sure that you get candidates that you want to represent you at every level of government in the state of Minnesota. What do you want to say to those people, Mickey? You have anything you want to add on?
Well, it's just like you said, Haji. You have to be informed. I mean, what the DFL counts on, especially in our city, more than anything else, is an apathy, a lack of feeling like you need to pay attention. You just go along with whatever the DFL says. Oh, this guy is endorsed by the DFL.
The DFL is not paying attention. I called in Martin and I told him everything, and he didn't want to listen to me. So
yeah,
go ahead.
They make their bread on people not knowing anything else other than what they tell them. And so, people on their own are going to have to learn to pay attention, to wake up, and to listen to the candidates and figure out which candidates are really talking about truthful, responsive, reflective, responsible governance, and which candidates are just talking nonsense, because it's a clear choice. I mean, when you look, we talked before about Omar Fattah versus Jeff Hayden. When you look at these two candidates, it's outrageous. There's just no comparison between them. And yet somehow the guy with all the experience, all the accolades, the history of responsive governing was defeated by some guy that just moved into the city a few years earlier. So there's clearly some problems within the system, but it also relies on people's kind of apathetic nature. They're their unwillingness to dig deep and figure out for themselves who the right candidate is, and just kind of go along with their party, no matter whether their party's headed in the right direction or not. That's the partisan politics aspect of it is very dangerous for us. So I would encourage people to not be so partisan, to be unbiased, to be open-minded, and to listen to the candidates and really get to meet them, get to know them, find out who they are. Do what you have to do to make sure that your vote isn't just a rubber stamping some of our problems into to continue. Don't be a part of the problem, be a part of the solution.
Thank you so much. That is Mickey Mo with his last word. This is the Haji Daily, and hopefully we will have a different name soon as we continue building the audience for this show and we're having this great conversation. Thank you for joining me today, Mickey. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Next one. When are we coming back, Haji? When are we going?
Monday, same time, 8 p.m. Central Time on Mondays. We'll be here talking to you guys. Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you so much. Thank you.